Mortal Kombat, out on HBO and theatrically, the new reboot adaptation of the long-standing video game series. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of the games. I played some of them very casually and recognized some of the characters, like know the rough outline of the story, but not too deep, not too much. But I was excited for the film nonetheless. The trailer looked quite promising, with well choreographed fights that crucially were extremely brutal and violent, much like the games. And if I'm honest, the movie kind of delivered on that promise, but everything else around it is a huge problem. Let's start with the story. So, Mortal Kombat is this mystical fighting tournament between Earth and Outworld, where champions from both worlds or planets fight to the death. Whoever wins 10 tournaments in a row gets control of the other world forever. In the movie, it is revealed that Outworld has won 9 in a row already, so they just need one more and then Earth is doomed or whatever. There is hope for us, however, because there is a prophecy that one dude can tip the scales. He's an MMA fighter called Cole Young. For some reason, he's the only person in the film who was not taken from the games but created from scratch, a new character. So the Earth heroes try to recruit him, but meanwhile the main boss of the other crew sends his assassins to Earth to kill all our heroes before the tournament begins to kind of make it easier. Now let's be real. The story is stupid as shit, and that's to be expected. But we're not really here for the story, are we? We're here for the fights. Problem is, the movie devotes an extraordinarily large amount of time trying to deliver exposition and explain the details of what's going on. I mean, I expected that they would just be like, there's a tournament, they're fighting, go. And it's just an hour and a half of people hitting each other on the head. But they do explain a lot, and the more they explain, the less it all makes sense. Like, the evil dudes coming to Earth at the beginning, they say it's cheating because fighting outside of the tournament is not allowed, it's prohibited. Except at some point they just say it is allowed, and nobody has a problem with it anymore. They also say that the main bosses, Shang Tsung on one side and Raiden on the other, they're sort of gods and they can watch the preparations of the fighters, but they cannot interfere directly. Except they do interfere all the time. Well, not all the time, because sometimes Raiden says he can't save someone's life because he's not allowed to interfere. But sometimes he can. It's just all over the place. It's super confusing. I mean, I can't imagine how confusing it must be for someone who has no knowledge of the games whatsoever. But that's not even the end of it. The most ridiculous part of it all is that the titular tournament, the Mortal Kombat, it never happens in the film. They just fight a bunch, and at the end, the evil boss says, right, this has been fun, but it's not over, we'll be back, and he just fucks off. And the movie literally ends with the heroes going once again to recruit new fighters for the tournament, which presumably will maybe come to be at some point in one of the sequels. It's very weird. And when the movie ended, I was like, wait, that's it? That's the end of the film? It felt unfinished. It like second act of the film ends. We're ready for the big climax, for the really meaty stuff now. And that's the end of the film. Nothing more. Who wrote this? I'm asking. Putting the story aside, I think one of the strengths that the movie should have drawn upon were the colorful characters. And yes, in some ways, that is what happens. Some characters are fairly memorable, like Liu Kang or Goro. The standout for me was Kano, who's this shit-talking Australian mercenary who felt almost like a very cynical audience insert, where everybody around is super serious about these prophecies and destiny and shit. He's just walking around like, I don't care, I'm not interested, you look stupid, you sound idiotic, just give me superpowers and I will fuck people up, and also I want money. Which sounds very one-dimensional, and is, but it's still incredibly entertaining. This guy is like the player in the game who doesn't give two shits about all the lore, and he just wants to min-max the mechanics, and I found it really hilarious. However, he's not the main protagonist. The main protagonist, for some reason, is this new guy called, he's played by Louis Tan, and he's just boring, bland, just the most vanilla character you can imagine. I couldn't tell you a single thing about him as a character, like, you know, how he is as a person, because his entire background is that he's got a wife and a kid, and he fights, and that's just it. He's poorly written, and even worse, Louis Tan is just incredibly wooden in the role. He sucks all of the energy out of the room whenever he's on screen. I have no idea why the filmmakers decided to make the least interesting character in the entire film the protagonist, but it just doesn't work. Now, the fights, okay. Some of them are incredible. Two duels between Sub-Zero and Scorpion, Kano versus some lizard guy, all of the fights involving Cabal. They look and feel incredible. They're well choreographed, well shot. Each of them, well, each of the good ones happens in a sort of distinct locale, so they're very memorable in that way. Well shot. They're probably brutal and very, very gruesome, like in the games, and just really fun to watch. But on the other hand, there are also some fights which are bland. Kano versus Sonya Blade, for instance, or every fight that Cole is involved in. So it's kind of hit and miss. And while I really enjoyed some of those sequences, I felt that there's just not enough of them to carry the movie, in my opinion. There's in it, there's like maybe 20-25 minutes of really solid material, but the rest just feels like filler. If you're a big fan of the games, then perhaps you'll enjoy the film more, knowing all the characters and recognizing some callbacks that I may have missed. But I have to say, I don't think it's a good film. Worse still, as I said, it feels unfinished. It ends in a very weird place. It has moments and elements in it that are incredibly entertaining, but it is bogged down by all this excessive amount of time devoted to a nonsensical story, the horrible protagonist, and the head-scratching narrative structure, which makes it seem like it doesn't even really have an ending. A bummer in my book.